Good afternoon, it's Pastor Aaron from Edgemont Church in Bristol, Tennessee. We're returning today in our study on the book of Proverbs, and we are up to chapter 11. We'll be looking at verses 1 through 8. But before we do, let's go before the Lord in prayer. Lord, help us today as we read your word, that we'd read it with open hearts, that you would impress your wisdom on us. Help us, Lord, that we would learn from you and grow from you, that you would shape us, that the image of Christ would be in us even more. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. So, I had said previously that sometimes when you go through Proverbs, you'll see a recognizable theme, and other times there won't be as much a theme. And in these first 8 verses of chapter 11, what you see a lot is the contrast between righteousness and wickedness. Again, kind of synonymously with foolishness and wisdom. So let's start at verse 1. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So when we talk about an abomination, what the word means ultimately is something that causes God disgust. That's what an abomination is, something that's abhorrent, something that causes disgust. And so what we're being told is God is disgusted when there's a false balance and that a just weight is his delight. So what he's ultimately telling us is that God is revulsed when we try to get ill-gotten gain from each other, when we are unjust toward one another. That is a disgust to him. And instead, he delights when we act with uprightness toward one another. So there's something for us to remember. I mean, abomination is a pretty strong word. God is offended when we try to defraud one another. And so we need to take that to heart. Verse 2, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with the humble is wisdom. This is like that same saying, pride goes before a fall. And that's what we're being told here. Pride is a sure sign that a fall is about to come. And, humility brings with it wisdom. Why is that so? Well, if you think about that for a little bit, when we become proud, we also often become blind. And that's an interesting thing to observe. And we see it more often, though, when we're looking at other people. So let's start there for a moment. When you think of an example of somebody who's proud, they're often blind to weaknesses, right? Well, let's not primarily point the finger then at other people. Let's look at ourselves for a moment. We all struggle sometimes with pride. And so it's important that we recognize pride brings disgrace. And part of the reason why it brings disgrace is that precisely because it makes us blind to our faults. Whereas the converse is true also. When we become humbled, that is, when we humble ourselves, when we acknowledge our weaknesses, when we are forthright about our shortcomings, we often have a truer vision about who we are and about others around us as well. And there's wisdom in that. So, there's this call for us to humble ourselves. Humility is not something that comes naturally to us as human beings. We tend to be proud. In fact, we can often be proud about our humility, can't we? So it's important that we take time then to cultivate humility in ourselves. And the only way that I know of to do that is to be honest with God and with others about our sin, to make a point of confessing our sin before God and before others when the need is there for us to confess it to others. If we can stay on our knees before the cross, it helps us to have humility in our hearts and to just have a humble mindset. It really is in humility that we best understand God's favor toward us and just how wonderful and marvelous it is. Verse 3, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. So here he's making a distinction between integrity and crookedness. And what he's saying is that integrity has the quality that it can give us a clear path in this life. No one would choose a path destined for ruin. But at the same time, crookedness, that's exactly where that path takes us. A crooked path, a path of defiance to God, always ends up in ruin, because God won't abide it. He will discipline it. He will, if it's his children, he will discipline it. If it's not his children, he may very well punish it. But integrity helps us to keep a clear path. So that's what's being offered to us. Look at those who we know act with integrity, and watch the way their lives go. They go better, don't they? Crookedness always winds up in ruin. Verse 4, riches do not profit on the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Here, it's kind of a dire proverb, isn't it? And what it's pointing out to us is that there is a day coming, a day of judgment. And on that day, would you rather be able to say, I am wealthy? Or would you rather be able to say, I'm forgiven, I'm delivered? And what he's saying is righteousness delivers from death. Righteousness delivers from death. If we didn't know about Jesus Christ, this verse might be a little less hopeful for us, because in the end, who really is righteous? I mean, righteous enough to get past the judgment seat of God. I'm not. I don't think human beings in general are. In fact, more than I think. I'm being I'm being facetious here. We, as human beings, are not righteous enough to make past the judgment seat of God. Isaiah makes that clear, right? He says that our righteous deeds are like filthy rags before God, because God is holy, and his standard of holiness is not mostly holy, it is total holiness. Total holiness. And I'm not there. And human beings aren't there. At least mere human beings. There's only one man. And he wasn't only a man. He was also the Son of God. Is the Son of God. And he is righteous. And the Bible tells us that, but now a righteousness from God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness from God comes through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. So, knowing Jesus, we can have a righteousness credited to us from God because of Jesus Christ. And in the end, that righteousness delivers us from death. And that is very good news. Wouldn't you rather go through this life knowing Christ and face the judgment seat, being forgiven and being delivered from death, than to go through this life having it all, trying to earn money at any cost, being wealthy, only to find yourself at the judgment seat of God, exposed for who you really are? That's what this proverb ultimately is teaching us. Righteousness delivers from death, whereas with the wicked it says, riches do not profit on the day of wrath. Verse 5, the righteousness of the blameless keeps his way straight, but the wicked falls by his own wickedness. Verse 6, the righteousness of the upright delivers them, but the treacherous are taken captive by their lust. So what he is saying here again is that righteousness helps us to steer a straight path in this life. And actually he goes a little further to point out that righteousness delivers us. What he's talking about is setting us free. And then he contrasts that with wickedness. And here he says, the treacherous are taken captive by their lust. And the interesting thing is the way that the world around us portrays this whole issue when it comes to lust. The world would like to look at Christians and say, you all are just repressive. You don't want anybody to have any fun, and you don't want, you think that only a man and a woman should be married, and that's the only right, moment for sex, and that's just a killjoy, or that's just an oppressive way of thinking about it. But in the end, what does lust really do for us? What does lust really do for human beings? Does it really help us to long and strive after someone who isn't ours from the Lord? Does it help? It really doesn't. All it does is make us captive. People involved in relationships that God says no about quickly find themselves entangled in them. You can't just get out. It's not that easy, because the heart is involved. And lust is that way. Even if it's not with it, a person-to-person thing. How many men are in bondage to pornography? Because that's precisely what happens. They think they could stop at any time, but the fact is, once you start, you get hooked and you can't stop. Lust becomes a bondage. It takes us captive. And so that's what this proverb is teaching us. Trying to do right can help to set us free, whereas walking into lust makes us captive. Moving on to the next verse. When the wicked dies, his hope will perish, and the expectation of wealth perishes too. Again, another very somber proverb for us, but what it's pointing out a great truth, which is that for human beings, apart from God, death is an end for us of what's good. Now, notice I didn't say it's an end. A lot of people like to think, well, there's nothing after the grave. It'll just be an end of everything. It'll be we say rest in peace. There is no peace after death for those who don't know God, because what there is after death is the promise of wrath, the promise of anger from God. And so, for those who go through this life and their highest goal is earning as much as they can have so that they can have all the nice things, if that is the goal through this life, then in the end, when death comes, it means not just the death of the body, but the death of hope and the death of wealth, the death of pleasantness, the death of all of those things. And that's a scary thought. It really is. But it's an important thought for us also, because for those who know that this life is not all about all that you can get, we sometimes need that reminder, don't we? We need the reminder that life isn't all about being comfortable here and now. That there are certain things it's not worth giving up for the sake of money. Certain people it's not worth giving up for the sake of money. Certain duties it's not worth giving up. Certain principles it's not worth giving up for the sake of money. This is not to say that having wealth is wrong, nor that earning wealth is wrong. They just need to be secondary or maybe even tertiary goals in this life, with the Lord being our highest, our family being close after that, both our at-home family and our church family, with love, and our duties to the Lord to love others being higher than our goal to be happy and comfortable. So that's important. We do need to remember an end. An end is approaching. An end is approaching. Will it be the end of suffering, or will it be the end of hope? The only way to have that hope is to find that hope in Jesus Christ, to the point where we believe it and we would stake our life on it, that we trust that Jesus died for us and that his love has entered into our lives and is beginning to change us. That's hope. That's hope. We'll keep going. Verse 8. The righteous is delivered from trouble, and the wicked walks into it instead. And this is kind of a summary, I guess, of the first 7 verses that we've just read. The path that the Lord calls us to as his people is a path of freedom, a path that sets us free to do right, and protects us from a lot of traps that would control us or rob hope from us. But if we don't know God, we just walk right into that trouble. The Lord helps to deliver us from a lot of the troubles that we would have if we he delivers us from trouble if we put our eyes on him, if we don't put our eyes on ourselves and what we can gain in this life. That's what we're being taught in these verses. I hope you have a great week. Lord bless y'all. Bye-bye.